Dick Chamberlain, as serial number 7272374. I was in the Navy. I enlisted when I was 17 years old. I left home 13th of March 1944. Went to Chicago, hopped the train and went to Farragut, Idaho for basic training. We got out there about 3 o'clock in the morning. All I had on was a suit, no overcoat. It was snowing and blowing, and it was cold. We finally get in the mess hall about 3 o'clock that morning. And then they got us all together and took us to a barracks. I was there for a month to go through boot camp. And after boot camp, I was sent to Seattle to catch a ship. I got the USS Kenneth Whiting. We boarded that. They went to Pacific. We had all guys on the ship for over 2 years. We got all engaged most all the battles of the islands. We ended up 20 miles from Okinawa. We had a flight of seaplanes that told the China coast. They'd leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, come back at 6 o'clock at night. Another batch would take off at 6 o'clock at night, come back at 6 o'clock in the morning. We sat there for 2 years, and we was hit with the Jap suicide plane the 22nd of June 1945. Lucky that somebody shot a 5-inch gun and knocked it off its course as it was coming in. And all it done to the ship was hit the port boat boom. Went into the side of the ship, knocked out 6 rivets through the pilot up on the deck. And we was on a list for 2 or 3 days till we got it fixed. When we left there in November of 45. We went to China. We was there 45 days, and they got to come home. We got in, so we got home, well, we'll get get leave to come home for Christmas. Well, we got 3 days leave. Gone for 2 years, come home, get 3 days leave. So I give my time to somebody else and I stayed aboard. We finally got our liberty, I think in January or February, for 30 days. What I'd done on the ship, I was in ship service. At that time, I was working in the laundry. And I got out, I think, about the July. I got discharged in the Navy in July of 46.
My name's Ralph Norman. I was Army serial number 36027-848. I was due to be drafted, but I enlisted before my number come up. I was in about the second group of boys that left Williamsfield. Ended up in Camp Forrest. First company I was with was combat engineers, and boys that put the boats together to make bridges across the rivers. And we went on the firing line and fired for record. I made high score of the engineer battalion. Got back to camp and read the news, and I was transferred to Ordnance Company. I new ordinance did quite a bit of welding, and I thought, oh, heck, here I go being a welder again. But they picked me out because I took down gun repair as a hobby. I ended up going to, well, we were on the Louisiana Maneuvers, and orders come through to report to Aberdeen, Maryland, a small arms school. And I had 3 months of training in repairing guns. And then we were shipped overseas. Our first stop was New Caledonia. And from there we went on through to Bougainville, Guadalcanal, Montana, Georgia, ended up on the Philippines. We had our equipment loaded on board ship, ready to go in on the invasion of Japan when they dropped the big bomb. After they dropped it, they wouldn't take anybody that had been in the Army very long. They wanted new soldiers to go in. My work overseas was repairing guns, and when you'd hang a rifle up in a tent, be gone a day, you'd come back, there'd be a bee that'd build a nest in the barrel. And every time you shot one of them, the barrel would bulge like a snake had swallowed a big egg.
Oh, gosh.
So we had lots of work of repairing, putting on new barrels on M1s and O3s.
Now, an M1 is a rifle,
Yeah,
and an O3 is,
old bolt action rifle.
okay.
The ordnance supply had stacks of rifles, barrels, new barrels for both guns, but they had no tools to put them on with. So we made our own tools. We made clamps to hold the barrels and special tools to hold the receivers, to unscrew them, and you get them back together. They were always short a few thousands on the head space. So we needed a reamer. The Army didn't have a reamer. There wasn't one in the South Pacific as far as I ever found out. But I made mine, and there it is.
I'll be darned. Now, what does that do then?
After you put a barrel on, you put a shell in, and it isn't quite long enough in the chamber. This reamer would cut just a little bit off of the front of the chamber to make headspace proper. Our ordnance company put on 50 new barrels and go out and shoot them, test fire them. Generally 48 or more would work. Some of the ordnance companies, other ordnance companies were working there that didn't have a reamer, they'd put on 50 new barrels and they'd go out and there wouldn't any of them work. So I guess the little reamer is my claim to being something different than most everybody else.
Your claim to fame, huh?
Thank you.
Gordon?
My name is Gordon White. Serial number is 31347335. Never forget it. I was a corporal in the Army, and I went in at Fort Devens, Massachusetts in February of 1942, or 43, I'm sorry. And I was there just a short time and was transferred to Camp Ellis down here in Illinois. And we trained there for almost a year, and then were shipped overseas to England. We went over in one of the largest convoys to cross the Atlantic. Ships as far as you could see in any direction. We landed in Swansea, Wales, and went by train from Swansea, Wales to the center of England. And we stayed in England until about a month after the Normandy invasion, and then we were transferred to France. And the general consensus at that time was the war would be over before we got to France, but it wasn't. We landed on Normandy beachhead and stayed in the Cherbourg Peninsula area until after Paris was liberated. Then we went across France and on into Belgium. And we were in Belgium during the Battle of the Bulge. We were in Bastogne and stayed in that area until they crossed the Moselle River. And then we went across the Moselle and then on across the Rhine River and on across central Germany until they stopped us. And my duty, I was a truck driver, and I was attached to a quartermaster bakery company, and the bakery company's mission was to supply fresh bread to the frontline troops every day. And that was quite a chore. I drove a big truck. There was 4 big trucks in our company. And we spent most of our time hauling ammunition and gasoline to the tankers and to the front. We was in Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge, and that whole area. And it was really an interesting experience. I got home in January of 1946, and came back to Illinois, got married, liked it here, and stayed here. Been here ever since.
Great, thanks. Paul?
My name is Paul Becker, rank Staff Sergeant, serial number 36482121, Army Air Force. I went in April of '43. I got my greetings in December of '42, which I didn't mind, but the hard part was that I had to go to the hospital and show my wife the letter. She just delivered our daughter, our first kid. But I got a 90-day extension to heal, so that's why I went in April. I went down to Camp Lewis too got my hair cut, you know, they got a shave and all. And from there, I went to basic at Keesler Field, Biloxi, Mississippi. From there, I went to Amarillo, Texas, where I went through B-17 engine school. Coming out of one of the top 5 of the class, I went to Seattle, Washington, to Boeing Aircraft Company, where I went to B-29 engine school. The good part about that, there was only 10 of us that went, and we had our own private Pullman all the way up the coast, and we had a heck of a good time. A couple of guys almost missed it several times, because we'd wake up in the morning, we'd be on a siding, waiting for somebody else to hook us up. Sent a couple of guys in town to get a case of beer or something, and they almost missed it a couple of times. But,
Well, now, can you explain the difference between a B-17 and a B-29?
quite a bit of difference.
Is there?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Size-wise?
Ton loadage and everything. They carry about twice the number of bombs in all 17. But
Okay, so they're both bomber planes?
oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And from there, I went to Denver, Colorado, where I went to B-29 Armament School, machine guns and cannon, all that. From there, let's see, where did I go from there? There I got a 15-day leave, I believe, and I had orders for Clovis. My deal said Clovis, Mexico, who I was assigned to. I never saw it. I went to a little airfield in Pratt, Kansas. I was there for several weeks. And there is where I got my first experience, really. One evening, a B-29 came in. I think it was a pilot told me it's the 7th one built, and had a problem engine. So I got a call to barracks, you went to B-29 school, go out there and see what you can do. So I did, and I found the problem. It's very simple. And the pilot asked me if I'd like to take it over. I'd test ride. I did, so that was my first ride on 29. From there, I was only there a very short time, and I was sent to Amarillo, Texas, or Amarillo, Nebraska, not Amarillo. Oh.
Now, you can remember your serial number, but you can't remember the name of it.
Nebraska.
Gee, it was just yesterday, Paul.
I remember.
I think was that
This isn't a test.
No.
Nebraska. Anyway, that was more or less our staging deal for overseas, and it was a B-17 field, actually. All the non-comm staffs, or the techs and the masters, were all ex-boys, airplane boys from Guadalcanal. And they made up our deal there. And from there, we went to Fort Lewis, back to Seattle. And there we went across to the Marianas, and I was stationed in Tinian with Enola Gay. And the only other thing there, all we did was work, really, and took care of our planes. The day the Enola Gay took off, I'll tell you, gentlemen, it's quite a secret. We didn't even know it was there. We found out on the radio that day that after the bomb was dropped, where the plane came from. We knew there was an outfit way over there somewhere doing something, but we could see them taking off and landing, but we never knew what the heck they were up to. And
Now, say that
I
again.
went on one-
Explain that to me again.
yeah.
What, the Enola Gay, is that what you said?
Mhm.
And that is,
B-29, the bomb
B-29.
carried the atomic bomb.
okay, okay.
And the only other deal I had on the whole thing is it was in August, I think around August 15th, or a little after, right before the armistice was signed over there. We were making trips with supplies and dropping them in prisoner of war camps.
Oh,
And I did make one trip on that. I went over to Osaka, Nagoya, flew over. And on the way home, there was a big storm over the Marianas, so we landed, above all places, at Iwo Jima. So I didn't get to walk the sands of Iwo anyway, nothing else. And outside of that, I wasn't too much.
and when did you come home?
I got home Thanksgiving morning about 2 o'clock. We loaded up after the deal. I had kind of funny, I had a line officer who was a young college boy that didn't know crap from trying to live on an airplane anyway. And I had one pilot. I had 3 airplanes. I lost one airplane. It was shot down over Japan. It was lead ship that night on the raid. The pilot told me he's going to get Tojo's Palace for me. So he did get a letter from me stating that he was shot down on flak and no engine problems. And I had another pilot. I don't know, it seemed like every 2 or 3 times he'd abort. Something's always wrong with an engine, something's always wrong. So the line chief told me one day to change that engine. I said, there's nothing wrong with it. I checked the sumps, I did everything. There was nothing wrong with that engine. And I told the lieutenant that. He said, Sergeant, how quick would you like to be a private? So that's why I never got another strike, believe me, because my MO called for Master Sergeant. I'm sure that that kind of fixed me up real good. And I was very happy to get home. See, my daughter was 4 months old when I left, 4 years old when I got back, so so I once in between them. So that's my little story.
Thanks. Victor?
My name is Victor Dean, and 36679-592. You never forget those. And it was in August of '43 when I went to Camp Grant, and I got a test up there, and I got skilled radio, but Fort Bragg called up and needed 500 troops. I was processed. I was one of the 500. So we went to Fort Bragg for basic. And it was 105 artillery. So went through basic there. I got to pull a lanyard once. And one time I was a gunner. And I could see that there's not too much demand for gunners in civilian life. So I went to the truck platoon. And after we got in December, we left there and went to Fort Sill in Oklahoma. And we joined the 241st Field Artillery there. and they were school troops. And they did a lot of firing for the NCO school at Fort Sill. Then in March, we went down into Gainesville, Texas, Camp Howes. And that's where we took all of our tests getting ready for overseas. And from there we went up to Camp Shanks in New York. And on the 2nd of July, we waved goodbye to the lady. And so we went over and into Scotland and took a train down to Lantarnum, Wales. And that's where we had to draw all of our equipment and everything, get ready to come over, go over to France. So on the 20th of August in '44, we landed at Utah Beach. And as I was saying, that was D+75. That's 75 days after D-Day. And it was the 20th of August. And 2 days later, we caught up with them over at Fontainebleau, outside of Paris. And that's where we started into combat, first round. And then when we went through Paris after it fell, well, you couldn't make a wrong turn because the people were so crowded. That's where you had to go. And so we was carrying some of the 5th Division infantry all up through Reims, and we'd stop, they'd go through the town, clean it out, and we'd meet them on the other side and go on. And it didn't do too bad till we hit Metz. And this was Patton's 3rd Army, and seems like they didn't want him going as fast as he was. So they shut our gas off. And just outside of Metz, I turned my Jeep around after we got to a position, and I was out of gas. And the next day, we got 3 cans, which is not quite 15 gallons. That was supposed to be enough for battalion headquarters and headquarters battery. Well, that's too many vehicles, but I did get 1 can. So that's why we had so much trouble with Metz. We had armor in Metz overnight, but they didn't have any support because everybody was out of gas. And so we was around the Metz area there for quite a while. And then they transferred us over to the 90th Division. So we was with them a while. And then we went up into Luxembourg with the 83rd Division. And so
He joined the good division.
then we left down there and we went back down to Allange, and that's where we fired some of the Maginot Line Fort guns. And they had a lot of ammunition for them, and after you get out of range, well, of course, the ammunition's no good. And they were a little bit smaller than what we are 105s, and it's 10 centimeters, which is a little less than 105 millimeter. So they wouldn't fit, so like you say, we didn't have a reamer. And so we fired those, and they were mounted solid in those forts. They didn't have any recoil on them. So by the time we left, they were starting to crack on the mountings. It was just across the river from, well, Thionville, it was the French name. Diedenhofen was what the Germans called. And then we went down, and I believe when we was going to go across the river, I think that's where the 10th Armored came in. Half of them went through where we were, and we waited on them. The other half went across the river at a different place. They got over there, and that was their first combat. Tank's a tank, bang, bang. But then they found out that they shouldn't shoot at their own tanks. And so we went across there, and they made a lot of ruts on, it's a pontoon bridge. And I didn't have any chains on my front wheels, and I got in these ruts made by one of the big trucks, and he went over the edge. And so I followed the ruts. I couldn't get out of them. And so I had to wait until the service battery came by with their wrecker. And he was the last one in the convoy. So when he pulled me out, I was the last one in the convoy. We got across the bridge, and I had it on the floor when we left the bridge, but I had the supply trailer behind my Jeep.